Welcome to another edition of the Intel with Greg Cosell. I'm Geoff Mosher alongside Adam Caplan, and joining us, of course, is Greg Cosell. This will be the final installment of this year's The Intel with Greg Cosell. It's 10 weeks really flew by, Greg, but we did a great job there with free agency and the draft. The Eagles draft is done. It was an interesting weekend for them. Because not only did they come away with drafting more players than they went in with picks, but they also brought in a running back,
Yeah,
DeAndre Swift from the
and it
Detroit
wasn't
Lions.
Bijan Robinson though, so I hope the fan base is okay with that.
I think because they got Jalen Carter, who we'll talk about in a second, everything was okay. Any other scenario may not have worked out well for the citizens of Philadelphia. However, let's talk about we did break down with you that night those first two picks. We'll go through it again, but DeAndre Swift, they bring in DeAndre Swift into this running game. Give us your take breakdown on DeAndre Swift and what he has been for the Lions offense the last few years.
Well, I loved DeAndre Swift coming out of Georgia. I, in fact, thought watching him coming out of Georgia, I said, and I'm sure that my evaluation is somewhere on social media that someone could put out. But I thought he was in some ways kind of a combination of Dalvin Cook and Alvin Kamara. That was sort of how I saw him coming out of Georgia. Now, he's been injured quite a bit. And again, that's a concern, durability. But obviously, he's not going to be a foundation back. He's not going to be asked to carry 20 times a game and be the bell cow, the lead dog. So given what his role likely will be, given that they have Penny and Gainwell, and I think we both know that both Scott and Sermon will not make the roster based on what they did with Swift. That remains to be seen as we go forward. But I think Swift is in a great situation where he can be part of a committee, and you can play to his strengths. He's a very good runner. He's a terrific pass receiver. He's another guy that gives you formation versatility because he can detach from the formation, which Gainwell can do. That's not what Penny does. Penny is a back. But now you have Gainwell and Swift who can both detach from the formation as receivers. But I really like DeAndre Swift coming out. He's had his moments. Look, he had that 50-yard run on the first or second play against the Eagles last year, where, as I recall, Bradbury should have made the tackle for about an 8-yard gain. But hey, that's what DeAndre Swift does. He can make defenders miss in space. So I thought that was a really good move, and they didn't really give up much to get him.
Yeah, Greg, I think when you look at the run game now, because they've got such versatility with guys who could be detached, and guys could play in the backfield like Penny, and obviously he's a home run hitter. And then you got the Boston Scott angle and Trey Sermon, Greg, before we move on to the actual draft. You're the perfect guy to talk about this because this guy was drafted by the Niners for that scheme. Didn't work out. But this guy's got talent. How do you think he could fit in here if he can?
Yeah, I mean, they're going to have a decision to make here about Scott versus Sermon because they're not going to keep five backs. They're certainly not going to dress five backs. So I don't know how that works, once you get to the season. Sermon was a fascinating study in his last year in college at Ohio State because down the stretch of that season, he was a dominant player. And he's more of a back. He's not as explosive as Penny, but he's a back like Penny. He's not necessarily someone you'll split out and detach and throw the ball to down the field. I always liked Trey Sermon. Again, I think most of us thought that when the Niners got him, that he'd be a really good Niners back. And for whatever reason, Adam, you may have more detail about that. I have heard that maybe he didn't understand what it means to be a pro, right off the bat. And obviously with Kyle Shanahan, that's a little bit of a problem. So who knows where he stands now, mentally and professionally. But, I think he's a pretty good back. I don't know how all this is going to play out, but we certainly know that Swift, Gainwell, and Penny will be on the roster. After that, I think you have to go through the offseason and training camp.
Penny's an interesting one, only because of his injury history. On production, yes, but injury history, you have to wonder if that has changed him at all, slowed him down. I mean, his body's been through the ringer.
No, it's true. But when he's played, particularly the last couple of years when he's played, he's been really dynamic.
Yeah.
He's 215, 220 pounds. I mean, he's not a little man.
Right.
So, he's, again, you never know about health. He could end up being totally healthy. You never know. But he is a really dynamic big back who has home run hitting ability.
The amazing thing, as you mentioned, with being able to put them all together is I think the combined salary of this group is less than what Miles Sanders is now making
Yeah,
in Carolina. It's just a fantastic move there.
well, one final point. I know we want to move on, but the Eagles' run game is a good part of it is scheme based. I'm not saying that anybody could be in the backfield. I'm not a believer in you just get a guy off the street. I know some people think that way about backs. You still want quality backs, but it's a highly schemed run game at its core. Now, obviously, in the second half of games, if they're ahead big, they'll line up and have more base kind of runs. But the Hurts factor is so paramount in the Eagles' run game with what it does to defenses that it really helps backs because it changes run support. It changes where defensive players line up. There's a lot that goes on because of Jalen Hurts that makes it, by NFL standards, relatively easier to run the football.
Got it. All right, let's go on to the draft. And I want to ask you a different viewpoint on both Jalen Carter and Nolan Smith, because we got your breakdowns and feel free to, again, kind of go through it. But for a skeptic who might say that Georgia's defense so far in the NFL, at least the most recent version of it, seems to be the collective sum better than the individual parts. If you look at Jordan Davis, you look at Devontae Wyatt, Nakobe Dean didn't play much last year. Quay Walker played. Right now he's more known for shoving a referee. Do you think there's anything to be said for that they were such a deep and talented unit that maybe there's worth some question about individually how good any of these players are going to be at the NFL level? Because they did used to say this about the Alabama players also at one point.
They used to say that in particular about Alabama defensive backs because
Correct.
Saban actually coaches the DBs and those guys are coached really hard, and a lot of people would say, well, they're as good as they're going to get.
Right. I should throw Trayvon Walker in, by the way, as another guy who played last year.
Had a good year last year, by the way.
Right.
And there's also other guys. Tyson Campbell ended up having a really solid season last year in his second year at corner for the Jaguars. So I think you have to look at that on a case-by-case basis. I believe that anyway. Others may disagree. But I think one factor does play into it, Geoff. The fact that because they have so many 5-stars, they play a lot of people. I mean, I remember watching their tape last year, and Jalen Carter was the guy I noticed, and he wasn't coming out. Watching their tape this year, I kept noticing number 13, Michael Williams, who's a true freshman, who in 2 years is going to be a top 5 pick in the draft. You notice guys who are not coming out because a lot of players play a lot of snaps because they have so many 5-star recruits on their roster. So what you see a lot at Georgia is a lot of these players come into the league having not played a lot of snaps, relative to what you want them to do in the league, especially if you draft them high.
Right.
I mean, Jordan Davis, this is not a debate about whether he played well or not, but they didn't trade up for Jordan Davis to have him play 20 snaps a game. Now, we'll see what happens this year, but, just like the Eagles didn't draft Jalen Carter to come in, and maybe this year he plays 20 snaps a game, although I think they'd like him to play more, but they didn't draft him to play 20 snaps a game. So I think there's an adjustment period for a lot of these guys because they don't play as many snaps at Georgia as they are expected to in the NFL, especially as much higher draft choices.
Greg, on Nolan Smith, because I remember you telling us that there are some snaps he could play as a stack backer, but ultimately down the line, because the draft is about projection with this defense, we'll see about Sean Desai, but we know they're going to run the Fangio system.
Right.
So over a series of 3 or 4 years here, what kind of role do you think he could have?
I mean, my sense is, assuming that Sean Desai essentially keeps the same, structural methodology of Jonathan Gannon, which Adam, I think is what they want, correct?
Yeah, they want to. Well, you're right, but they definitely want to keep the Fangio system. And
yes, so there's not going to be dramatic changes.
Correct.
So given that, my sense is in that particular system, he essentially fills the Hassan Reddick role. Now we know they still have Hassan Reddick in his second year in a longer term contract, and he's still a relatively young player. So it's not as if he's going to replace Hassan Reddick, but I think they probably see him in that role as a Sam linebacker who plays on the line of scrimmage. Look, Reddick did not have that many snaps a year ago where he played in coverage. I believe it was less than 100. He was predominantly a pass rusher, but he did drop on occasion. I think Smith is is a better run defender than Hassan Reddick. One thing that really stood about Nolan Smith is even though he's only 238 pounds, he played with strength at the point of attack, surprising strength. And again, we don't know what his role is going to be this year. I suggested, and others, there are other former coaches that I've talked to who believe that he could be a stacked backer if you wanted him to be. I don't know if that's something the Eagles are thinking about, because if they had to play a game today, Dean and Moro would be the starting stack backers, correct? When they would have two linebackers?
Yeah.
Right. So, Moro is going to be one of them for sure, because he's got major experience in the league and he's coming off his best season as a full-time starter a year ago with the Bears. He's going to be a starter. Dean, they're counting on, but don't forget, Dean was a third-round pick. I know people love Nakobe Dean because he went to Georgia. They won the national championship. He seemed to be kind of the leader of the group. But Nakobe Dean's a little bit of a question mark, only because he's a little bit of an outlier. He's short. Right. So, we don't know that about Nakobe Dean. The assumption is being made, and we all hope, but we don't know that.
I mean, in general, and while this team has a lot of speed and explosion, you can, as you mentioned, Moro and Dean, Greg, the front six here, front seven on base, it's a pretty light one, and they were exposed at times last year for being light, and they clearly did not go into this offseason thinking that was standing in their way of their ultimate objection or ultimate goal, because they didn't really change. If anything, they got lighter.
And it's funny, Geoff, you say that because that's not how they see themselves, as we know. Not only philosophically, from a defensive perspective, but from an overall team perspective, because they see themselves as a team that's going to score 30 points a game, that's going to be dominant offensively in the first half and explosive. And in the second half, the goal is going to be to rush the quarterback.
Right.
So that's why they want to get defensive linemen. I mean, that's why Jalen Carter's there. We can get to their 7th-round pick, who I actually liked much more than a 7th-round pick. And again, he's no sure bet to make the team because he's a 7th-round pick, but we'll get to that. But the point is that's the way they see themselves. So they don't see the linebacker position as in their overall philosophical view of the world as being a truly important position.
Correct. All right, let's move to the 3rd round. The Eagles make 2 picks. They bring home an offensive lineman, Tyler Steen from Alabama, and a safety. That's right, a safety in the 3rd round, Sidney Brown from Illinois. So let's start with Tyler Steen, Greg.
Yeah, I really liked Tyler Steen's tape. And again, I know they see him as a guard, and that's probably a function of arm length because it's less than 33 inches, which is normally kind of the deciding length for the way a lot of people see tackles in this league, unless you're viewed as special, like a Skoronski, is probably going to play tackle. But Tyler Steen is 6'6", 321. He has really good size. I thought that his tape in 2022 at left tackle was good. I thought he really was good in pass pro. I thought he compensated for his short arms really well with timely and efficient use of hand strikes. He proactively kept pass rushers from exploiting those shorter arms and getting inside of him and into his chest. The worst thing you can do as an offensive lineman, and I see this on tape because I watch so much college tape, is there's so many college offensive tackles that have late and wide hands. And what I mean by that is they're late with their strikes and they're wide. They come in like this. That lets guys into your chest. That's the last thing you want to do in the NFL. You can get away with it in college at times just because the quality is not quite as good, obviously, as you face every Sunday in the National Football League. But even the worst pass rushing edge rushers in the NFL, if they get into your chest, that's a problem. So Steen, I thought, did a really good job of compensating for his shorter arms. He did not let people into his chest. I really liked him. He will compete, I imagine, for the starting right guard position, and not surprise me if he wins that.
Yeah, right away they're putting him in the fire. So, Greg, before we move on to the safety, Brown, in your tape study over the years, is it harder for tackles to move inside? What's the challenge like for these guys?
That's a great question. And to be honest with you, and I don't want to speak out of school, I'm not, I don't feel 100% equipped to answer that, Adam. And I'm just being honest. I mean, everybody just assumes that, hey, if you don't have great tackle traits, that you just put a guy inside and it's no problem at all. my guess is that's not quite true, but I'm being honest. I don't know the details of why that would be. Obviously, the positions are different. At tackle, you're on an island more. You don't have help on one side. Inside, you have theoretically bodies on either side of you. It's just a different position. That's the thing. It's just different. And, the assumption is, oh, yeah, guys can just go inside and there's no
Yeah,
problem.
exactly.
Yeah, which my guess is not true. But Steen, I really like the way in which he played. Like I said, they have a big. Imagine if he's the starting right guard. How big? Obviously Kelsey is going to be a Hall of Famer, and he's not big, but he's so great. But then you'd have two guards, and Steen at 320, and Dickerson, who's what 330, 335. I mean, that is a big offensive line if he were to win that job. And I think he's got a legit chance because Cam Jurgens, people may forget, he's a bulked up tight end. He went in Nebraska as a tight end.
Yeah.
He had to bulk up just to get to 300 pounds. He's not getting to 325. His body can't do that. So there's no guarantee he's the starting right guard.
Right.
And that's why look, when you draft an offensive guard, okay, in round 3, because normally unless guards are special like Quentin Nelson, an offensive guard in round 3 means you consider that guy a serious potential starter.
And Greg, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was just saying on Sidney Brown, this is and we were mentioning this on our show. This pick was similar to Avonte Maddox, where the entire scouting department love this player. Like they're sure that he's going to be that guy. I know that a lot of people talk about Jartavius Martin, who's with Washington, but this kid's a guy that's universally liked. What did you like about his tape?
Well, I guess it's maybe a good thing I wasn't in their scouting department. I mean, I think he's an interesting player. Essentially what he did here's what he essentially did in college. He was a box safety. He was a strong safety. He played predominantly in the box on the tight end side. What he did exceptionally well in college was play man-to-man on tight ends. Now, I think that's a question in the NFL because he's 5'10", but he did have a really great performance man-to-man against Sam Laporta, who is a high-quality tight end prospect who got drafted by the Lions, I believe, in the 2nd round. And Laporta is going to be a good pro, in my opinion. But Brown played tight ends really, really well. The question is, can he do that in the NFL at 5'10", and will he be asked to do that in the context of the Eagles' defense? As I said, he predominantly played in the box, and he's not a very good tackler. That's a big issue for Sidney Brown. He's not really a very good box player, but he played in the box. But he's got, as you guys know better than I, the Eagles are big on the measurables and the analytics, and he's got phenomenal athletic testing measurables. Phenomenal. He can run. I mean, he is a run and chase player. And he plays with urgency. He plays with movement. He plays with high-level competitiveness. He's got outstanding play speed and range. He makes plays sideline to sideline. There's a run and hit element to his game. He's super competitive. You love the way this kid plays. And as I said, the athletic testing measurables are off the charts. So there's positives and there's negatives. And to me, that's why he's a 3rd-round pick.
Interesting. The Eagles did acknowledge that he was a box safety in college, and that what influenced their opinion was, I guess, at the Senior Bowl, they had him playing a lot of the post just to see what he could do, and they were impressed. And I think that's probably where his athletic traits were able to compensate for the lack of experience there.
Yeah, I could easily see if they're going to play cover 4 quarters still as a base defense, where again, no one plays anything 80% of the time, but the Fangio defense cover 4 is foundational. I could easily see him being a quarter safety to the boundary side of the field. I could easily see that. He can do that. He did play snaps of post safety at Illinois. He did play snaps on the back end. Illinois played a lot of 2-man coverage in 3rd down situations, and in 2-man, he did not play the tight end. He was a back end safety. So he has experience playing on the back end. And this kid, by the way, he can run. I mean, there's no question about that. I mean, this kid, he has tremendous build up speed. I mean, that's what he is. He's a tight-hipped, straight-line, linear athlete with excellent build-up speed and closing burst to the football. And man, does he play hard.
Before we move on to Ringo, Greg, he did have 6 picks, and I know from talking to someone in scouting, you really love that he's around the football, but is he a guy? Because we all know coming in that he's a guy who's covered the tight end a lot. But those picks, Greg, did you notice anything? Was it like reading the deep? Like,
No.
What was so good about the picks?
Yeah, a couple of those picks came when he was matched up man to man. The first or second play, and I was joking with Ike Reese about this because he's Michigan State.
Yeah.
He made a pick on the first or second play against Michigan State where he was just Velcroed the tight end and made an unbelievable play. So he made some good picks. No, in college football, he was great at matching up man to man to the tight ends. The only question, because he's 5'10", is he going to do that in the NFL? That, to me, that's a projection.
Gotcha. Yeah. All right, we move on to their next pick, and it was all the way in the 4th round. And I hope I pronounced the name right. I still have to get it. Is it Kelee or Kelee Ringo?
It's Kelee.
Kelee Ringo, the corner from Georgia.
Big surprise there.
Yeah.
Didn't
we? Real quick. I thought we had a discussion on an earlier show, the Intel with Greg Cosell, about Ringo. Was he not one of the highest recruits coming out the year of high school? Wasn't he supposed to be sort of a 5-star, Mr. All Everything? Okay.
He came out of Arizona as a big-time 5-star, the #1 corner prospect in the nation, and a top 20 recruit overall, regardless of position.
Wow.
And that's because he's 6'2", 207, and is 40 times off the charts at 4.36. Doesn't play like that. See, to me, Ringo got drafted where he should have gotten drafted. I know that was probably a surprise to a lot of people, and I know that a lot of other draft guys, guys we all respect, had him much, much higher. I did not. Now, again, that doesn't mean he can't be a good pro. See, that's the thing. It doesn't mean, just because you have an evaluation of a guy in college that he can't be a good pro. There's so many factors that go into that. But I thought that based on his college tape, that he was not a top 50 prospect, which a lot of people had him at. I mean, the measurables are phenomenal, as I said. But you're dealing with a guy that is not really very good playing off coverage at all. He's more comfortable playing press. He's better at that. Although despite his speed, he doesn't play that fast, and people ran by him on occasion. But he really does not have a great feel for routes. He doesn't have a great feel for when routes break. And one thing that he can't do, and you may recall interviewing TJ Houshmandzadeh at the Super Bowl or the Combine. I was a Super Bowl.
Super Bowl, yeah.
Super Bowl, yeah. And I've gotten to know him well. And, he talks about this with receivers, but it holds true for corners as well. You may recall him talking about receivers and their ability to stop. It's true for corners. Kelee Ringo can't stop. So what happens a lot is when he's in off coverage and receivers challenge him and threaten him vertically off the ball, because obviously if he's in off coverage, the receivers have free access so they can build up velocity and speed. He can't stop when they stop. So in other words, when they run curl routes or comebacks or, out routes, any kind of intermediate route, he struggles to stop and change direction. And that that's a big problem. But he's got good measurables. He's got straight line speed. He comes from a great program. The pedigree is there. He's got really good testing measurables. But to me, he was drafted where he should be.
Interesting stuff. All right, moving on to a guy that I heard a little bit before the draft, Greg. In fact, I think you and I talked about him briefly. It's Tanner McKee, the quarterback at Stanford. Yeah, what do you got on him?
Yeah, Tanner McKee's interesting because on first glance you'd think, God, he doesn't fit the Eagles at all.
Yeah,
because he's essentially a pocket quarterback. He's got minimal second reaction outside of structure ability. I mean, if there's a lane right in front of him, he can run and gain some yards, but he's not going to make plays with his legs. That's not his game. Now, he's pretty refined for a pocket quarterback. We know that the term system quarterback is thrown around a lot. But to me, what a system quarterback is that the design of the pass game must provide clean throws for the quarterback. Whether it's the first read, second read, third read, the system has to present the throws because he's not going to make something happen outside of the system. That's what McKee is. Although I will say this, Stanford ran a ton of RPO concepts. They did boot him out a lot. He was actually pretty good booting both right and left. Even though he's not a second reaction player, he was very good in boot action. And they ran a lot of those RPO quick game throws, so he's got a ton of experience doing that. Obviously, he's not there's no threat of him running. He's not going to change the way the defense plays. The thing about McKee, the reason he was drafted where he was is, the bottom line based on his Stanford tape is, even though he's a pocket quarterback and has some really positive traits, anticipation, timing, for the most part, pretty precise with his location, he's not high level enough. If he was super high level with those traits, he would have been a second or third round pick. He's just not high level enough as a pocket quarterback. And that's why he was drafted where he was.
I'll ask a very unfair question. How would you compare him to the last Stanford quarterback, Mills?
Oh, Mills is better.
Just better all around, and because they're both guys who are kind of concrete statues. That's why
Mills.
Well,
Mills,
I don't want to say concrete. Yeah. Not
Mills,
known for running around.
Mills moves better. I think he throws it probably a little better. I think Mills is a better prospect than McKee.
Gotcha. Completely unfair question, but
no, that's fine. Yeah, that's fine.
All right, so you like the Eagles' last pick, their 7th rounder, Moro Ojomo. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Defensive tackle, or is he a tackle, Greg, or an end in the NFL?
He's a tackle.
Okay.
I think he's an interior D tackle prospect. I liked him. I thought that he had a really desirable combination of strength, power, quickness, movement. He's got tremendous arm length, which he does maximize effectively with arm extension, and he has quick shock coming off the ball. Sort of that 6 to 10 inch shock. That's what you're looking for coming off the ball. And he's good at that. I think he's scheme versatile, which is what the Eagles like. He can, be a 3 technique. He can be a 4-eye. He can play in their 5-man front as, essentially as a D tackle. He's not a pass rusher at this point. That's a work in progress for sure, but he certainly has the physical traits to develop into that over time with coaching and experience. May never be dominant at it, but I think he'll get better. I think he's got the physical traits and mental competitiveness to play in this league. And again, the way drafts map out, you have no idea. It's certainly possible he was higher on some people's boards, and the way the draft just played out, he got, made it to the 7th round. But I thought his tape clearly suggested that he was better than a 7th round player.
And the analytic data is really good on him.
Yeah.
Height, weight, speed. His 10-yard split was very good. His bench was also very good. He's got big hands. Greg, as you said, he's long, 34.5-inch arms.
Yeah.
Wow. So it sounds like, again, we know it's a projection, but a guy that you liked clearly could have been drafted earlier. I'm interested to see.
Well, that's what I thought. I mean, again,
into that.
Yeah, we all know 7th round picks are crapshoots to make the team, guarantee. But I'll tell you one thing: when he gets into camp, I mean, the OTAs are different because it's not hitting and all that. But once we get to camp, take a peek at this guy, because this guy, he plays really hard. He's you're going to notice him in training camp. Now that doesn't mean he's going to make the team, but you're going to notice him.
All right, Greg, great stuff. It has been a fantastic couple of months with you doing the Intel with Greg Cosell. Something tells me that it's not going to be too much longer before you're back on the Inside the Birds network here.
I'm hoping so, Geoff. I'm hoping so.
Yeah, we'll have to reevaluate. And I'm not happy with a few things. No, I'm just kidding.
I know.
I'm not happy that I think you're getting more popular
yeah.
than me on our own show.
Yeah, and then Caplan, he's killing us. Yeah. So,
yeah. God, he's been under reevaluation for 5 years. No, it's been awesome. We really appreciate having you. And we will again catch up with you pretty soon, I'm sure. Thanks for everything.
No, thank you guys. Appreciate it.
Awesome.
All right. For Greg Cosell and Adam Caplan, I'm Geoff Mosher. You've been watching the Intel with Greg Cosell.